Our party arrived near Gwanghwamun half an hour before the promised time. In the meantime, the same message appeared in my head. You are the strongest incarnation in Seoul. Damn, I wanted to say I already knew. Frankly, I felt embarrassed every time I heard it. I couldn't guarantee victory against Yu Jung-hyuk even if I used all my power, and I barely managed to beat Nirvana. Why was I the strongest? Then a sentence from the 51st regression of Ways of Survival appeared. Strength and weakness in the star stream have nothing to do with power or skill proficiency. The standards of strength come from the story. Then there were the words that Nirvana had said. Strength and weakness are ultimately determined by the story. Dokshashi! In the distance, Lee Hyung-sung and Jung Hee-won were approaching. It seemed their bond with each other was stronger after overcoming the difficult situation together. Jung Hee-won waved at me. I saw the proclamation of war. It was very beautiful. How are you feeling? I'm fine. Hyung-sung, she was a bit hurt. I will be fine. He's just bluffing. At the end of Jung Hee-won's words, Lee Hyung-sung struck his chest to prove he wasn't bluffing. It was exaggerated, but it was hard to see it as a bluff. Lee Hyung-sung had started to inherit the story of the Master of Steel. Perhaps Lee Hyung-sung is one of the top 5 incarnations in the Seoul Dome. He was strengthened by inheriting the story. Lee Hyung-sung was the perfect example of strength as a story. It was the price of a story that determined the strength in this world. Perhaps I was ranked as the strongest incarnation because the stories I accumulated in this life were at an impossible level. Of course, the stories of regressor Yu Jung-hyuk and the reincarnator Nirvana were also formidable, but their story was of the past. The landscape of Gwanghwamun started to be seen in the distance. I checked the time. 3 hours and 40 minutes had passed since the first wave. Once every 4 hours, the monsters would come. The second wave would soon be upon us. The 5th grade monsters will soon come. Will the other incarnations be okay? It will be fine here. I looked around and the eyes of Jung Hee-won and the party members moved with me. It was more crowded than it was 10 minutes ago, and the number of people was growing. Jung Hee-won started to realize something. Shouts came from all over the place. Everyone in Seoul was gathering at Gwanghwamun. Let's defeat the Salvation Church's leader. We have to kill him and end this scenario. People armed with weapons were shouting. No one was talking about freedom or equality. It was because the humans of the present were too shabby to talk about such a grand concept. Instead, they gathered for survival. Follow the Supreme King! Break the Salvation Church! Lee Hyung-sung looked at the scene with a complicated gaze and said, Dokshashi knew this would happen. I did expect it. No matter how many new incarnations came in or how popular the Salvation Church was, the majority of the Seoul population were existing incarnations. They just needed a focal point to go beyond factions. Gong Pil-do looked at the crowd and sighed. South Korea is ruined. Damn it. Are the lawmakers who were going to return my land dead? You are saying those words in a situation like this? Lee Ji-hee clicked her tongue and Gong Pil-do rubbed his lips. What about you, Sang-ah? I heard she was caught by the Salvation Church. We'll go and get her, however, not right now. I couldn't be hasty. Even Nirvana wouldn't dare touch the terminal of the Nebula Olympus unless he was thinking about a war between nebula. All of Gwanghwamun was becoming heated up by the incarnations when a shining message appeared in the air. Hint 2. The 9th strongest incarnation in Seoul Dome is Insect Boy Lee Gil-young. Lee Gil-young's eyes shone when his name was called. Hyung, I'm 9th. It is ridiculous. I'm weaker than that kid? Lee Ji-hee grumbled. Stop talking and get ready. The party members nodded simultaneously. The second hit was announced, and the second wave would soon begin. Roars were heard from the outskirts of Seoul, and the cries of monsters started to be heard. 5th grade monsters that could be classified as small disasters started to emerge. In other words, it was a level that ordinary incarnations couldn't handle. Fortunately, all the incarnations were gathered near Gwanghwamun, and it wasn't an impossible fight. The narrower the area to protect, the easier it was to save the incarnations. We have to settle this in 4 hours. After that, 4th grade monsters will start to emerge. It is the end once that happens. The party members nodded. There was nothing scary about small disasters, but they didn't want to see the monsters of the upper rank. I asked Gong Pil-do and Lee Hyung-sung to lead the incarnations and form a defense network. Leave it to me. Guanghua Moon will become my land after this scenario is over. I smiled and said, Go ahead, do what you want. Sadly, once this scenario was over, the soul land that Gong Pildu desired wouldn't exist. I led the rest of the group to the center of Guanghua Moon. In the center of Guanghua Moon, there was a large dough that didn't originally exist. It wasn't an original building. There was no stadium in Guanghua Moon. It was a space that the Salvation Church temporarily added. The interior of the dome was still opaque, but when I looked closely, a doll was standing on top and giving a speech. All incarnations. Who is our real enemy? Why are we now pointing our spears and swords towards each other? Jung Hee-won frowned at the voice. It is the Neutral King. The Neutral King was using voice amplification at the top of the dome like he was a Dokkaebi. I naturally understand your feelings. Whether it is the Salvation members or other forces, we are all weak people. We are just victims of the scenario. In fact, there is no point in fighting between us here. This is what the Dokkaebi wants. Shut up! It was the Salvation Church who started fighting first. Yes, kill him. Jung Il-du laughed lightly. Everyone, don't you know that the monsters are coming? Seoul will be destroyed if we fight. Then what are you going to do? Everyone knows this is a scenario where we can live if the strongest incarnation sacrifices themselves. The opaque exterior of the stadium became transparent and the interior started to show. There were 2 people standing on a stage with the gorgeous spotlight behind them. The 2 heroes who are coming forward for the incarnations of Seoul Dome. I will introduce you to the 2 strongest incarnation candidates. The Salvation members on the opposite side of the dome clapped loudly. Yu Jung-hyuk! Yu Jung-hyuk! Nirvana! Nirvana! The incarnation seemed baffled by the sudden change of atmosphere. What is this? Are they fighting already? I knew what they were thinking. What if we can clear the scenario like this? Regardless of whether it's the Salvation leader or the Supreme King, isn't it good for us if both of them die in this fight? Every human was a coward. Nirvana knew that humans were the most cowardly. It was time for the unattainable future. Some people had already died while others would fight back and find a way to live. I approached the dome and hit the wall. The incarnation Jung Il-du is using Fair Duel Level 3. All incarnations apart from those involved in the duel aren't allowed to enter the stage. He used the stigma of Gwanghaegun. In this case, no one apart from Yu Jung-hyuk and Nirvana could physically get involved in the battle. I spoke to Jung Hee-won and Lee Ji-hee. Kill Jun Il-du. The next moment, something burst from inside the stadium. Finally, the battle between Yu Jung-hyuk and Nirvana started. There was a gigantic screen on the dome that was created by the Dokkaebi. You are doing something interesting. I think it will be a fun fight, so I'm prepared to let everyone see it. On the screen, I could see Yu Jung-hyuk's 2 swords and Nirvana's white magic power colliding. Yu Jung-hyuk's breaking the sky sword and Nirvana's mandala caused a storm in the space. Dozens of exchanges were done in a short amount of time. It was a cautious and elaborate battle. They used transmission or succession to read the other person's skills and tried to gain an advantage. This was a confrontation between a regressor and a reincarnator. It was Nirvana who moved first in earnest. Nirvana's mandala rotated quickly, spinning his magic power as a threat that attacked Yu Jung-hyuk's body. Yu Jung-hyuk jumped high into the sky, avoiding the white magic power. At first glance, it seemed like an endless number. It was because the white magic power acted according to his movements. Yu Jung-hyuk quickly spun his blades to hit the mandala's power, but unfortunately missed 2 bundles. Blood poured from his left shoulder and thigh. A loud sound emerged from the mouth of an incarnation. Jun Il-du was making a fuss as he nervously fled from Jung Hee-won. It will be like this. However, Yu Jung-hyuk was calm. Yu Jung-hyuk jumped near the dome ceiling and dived down while holding the heavenly sword of gathering clouds. Blue magic power was nestled in the sword, but Nirvana was already finishing his defense. Come on, Yu Jung-hyuk. At this moment, the size of the heavenly sword of gathering clouds suddenly changed. It was transformed into a giant sword and started to grow to the size of a tall building. Yu Jung-hyuk's arm holding the sword was the same. It was like the right arm of a giant god. Giant body transformation. The surprised Nirvana tried to leave the range of the blade, but it was already too late. The weight of the blade that split the sky literally fell onto Nirvana. There was a huge roar, and the entire stage was filled with dust. Quah! Nirvana was hit hard and lay in a deep pit made by Yu Jung-hyuk's sword. The incarnations exclaimed. Numerous arms had emerged from the Andala. The 1,000 hands of Avalokitesvara. The hands of the Bodhisattva were fighting against the giant sword. If it wasn't for the dome, the area would have been destroyed by the collision. All the incarnations were overwhelmed by the sight. This is a showdown between the two strongest in Seoul. The strongest. I somehow felt bitter. I swallowed the bitter taste and used Omniscient Reader's viewpoint. On the surface, it seemed like a simple confrontation of strength, but in this moment, there was a flow of thoughts between Nirvana and Yu Jung-hyuk. Nirvana thought, did the level of mental barrier go up? The magic power wavelength is becoming stronger. Your skill level is lower than I thought. What did you gain from succession? You act like your left shoulder is hurt, but that is a trap. Giant body transformation has a short duration. You should look at the whole of a match. It was a battlefield that only I could see. The two thoughts that didn't touch each other were depicting a battle that hadn't yet occurred. I felt pure admiration and appreciated the view. How much time passed? I reached the result of this confrontation faster than anyone in the dome. I jumped and headed to the rooftop of a nearby building overlooking the dome. Then I opened my mouth. Han Soo-young, I know you are watching. The space behind me split apart and Han Soo-young appeared from the darkness. How did you know? Han Soo-young was wearing a blue combat suit that clung to her body. Perhaps it was a hidden piece from Peaceland. You shouldn't stay away after hearing the loudspeaker. Tch! The constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon shows its teeth towards you. As expected, Han Soo-young chose her sponsor. Han Soo-young approached me and sat on the railing. It was fun. Why did you call me? Why are you watching? Don't you want to clear the scenario? I need to know how clearly who the strongest is. Wait, you know who it is? I know. Who? Is it Yu Jung-hyuk? No. Han Soo-young sighed with relief. I'm glad. If that bastard dies, the world will go back. Now this isn't difficult. Han Soo-young pulled out a dagger. The Salvation Leader. Are you gonna kill him? I shook my head towards Han Soo-young, who was going to descend. He isn't the strongest. No? Then who? Who should I kill? I silently stared at Han Soo-young. After a while, her eyes filled with disbelief. Don't tell me. I nodded. Let's decorate the finale of this scenario.